G'day friends and fans, welcome to Dave Talks Stuff. Now, I'm pretty sure by now, a lot of people think that everything wrong with feminism is intentional. No, I actually think, that modern feminism has deliberately impacted today's families and created leftover women. This was somewhat intentional, right? You see the components of modern feminism: Satanism, greed, right? Misandry, although that's always been there. But a lot of women, this is why they are leaving feminism, is realizing that it is a lesbian cult and that feminism is a mating call, right? So we don't know exactly where or when or what time. Oh wait, we do. We know where modern feminism split. It is the J.K. Rowling effect. It is when J.K. was increasingly popular, there was a call to arms, right? She had an audience and she was able to sway that audience and persuade women in droves to buy her book. So she successfully and had persuasion and a deliberately crafted control of a large portion of the culture, which is exactly what feminism wanted, right? To control women, to have them move. So when they raise their hands, all the other women raise their hands. When the head feminist said jump, they all jumped. When they said buy, they would buy. So then came the great J.K. betrayal when she refused the new direction of feminism. And as, of course, the men in tights. So you had the men in tights come along, and they were not welcomed by J.K. and many of her acolytes. But as you know, in the subsequent years, J.K. Rowling has gone down somewhat in popularity. Women have moved away from J.K., but it's now feminism is split into the pro and anti-trans movement, and increasingly more and more women are leaving feminism. But it has always been that way. Right? There's always been splits in feminism, right? In the pre-feminist landscape, right, there were womanists, right? Worship of women in many forms throughout Western culture. The conspiracy theory, the patriarchy, going all the way back to Rome. Yet in reality, right, if society was so anti-woman, where did all these laws and protections for women come from, particularly in the Middle Ages, right? Women, the gynocentric culture has always been there. What we have now is a walking away from gyno worship. And women, while it initially felt great and empowering to them, increasingly they are feeling frustrated and left out, right? It's not, feminism isn't a movement for women. It's a movement for a few rich women to grift, to fund their lifestyles, to fund their protests, to fund their influence peddling campaigns, to fund their clinics, to fund their law groups, to fund their expensive lifestyles through easy divorce, to fund lawyers who increasingly themselves are greedy and taking a bigger and bigger cut off women who get divorced, finding themselves, of course, after a while, lonely, confused, and regretting. You can look it up. There are plenty of divorce regret videos for you to choose from. But, right, pre-feminism, women had a special legal and economic status, which they want in one hand, but on the other, they wanted suffrage, right? See, with the rise of democracy, right, with the rise of parliamentary systems across Europe, more and more women wanted to vote. But the thing is, it had a cost, right? And for a long time, women reduced that cost. But married women's rights began in Britain, way back as 1882. Again, it's the rise of the left. Control over property, control over income, challenge the traditional views where women, right, allegedly were controlled by their husbands. Never true. It's always been the state. It's always been the state. The state used to act against women through their husbands. The state turned women against men in order to increase the vote support for the state. Right? State actors increasingly wanted influence. Everybody realizes probably that feminism is a influence peddling operation. It is a financial motivated organization primarily, although it is also a political and economic, broader economic terms in deciding who is wealthy and who isn't through punishment by women, right? If you're not a feminist, you don't get married, you don't get the financial support, right? You don't understand, right, that successful women have always been the backbone of society because they've either been successful mothers, successful wives, successful at supporting their husbands. Financially, however, there were increasingly greedy individuals who realized that they could get these women to want more, and by wanting more, then turn against their husbands to take their wealth off them instead of supporting them, living off them, and inheriting it later anyway, right? To take them so that lawyers can take a cut, so feminists can have an increased wealth and lifestyle, and of course it always comes at the expense of others. Now, women are suddenly realizing that as wealth has been diluted by turning everybody into a two-income household, wealth is diluted, right? And women, right, the last thing they want to be told is, well, within 25 years, you'll have to be living with someone in order to make ends meet, right? We have increasing numbers where we now have what they call micro-communities, where you have, once where there were houses, and now rooms for rent, with women increasingly 4, bedroom houses with 4 women and a common room. And increasingly, because women can't get along, this is just creating more fiction, right? Women don't want to be around other women who are in a similar boat, right? They don't want to be at the bottom of the economic scale, so they sold themselves out. Now, anti-feminism has risen, not just the result of women walking away, but of the former male feminists and just the victims of feminism joining the victims of feminism, right? And particularly mgtow is increasingly part of a broader red pill movement, right? For a long time, I made red pill revolution hashtag red pill revolution videos, mostly political. Most of them I posted on Rumble and BitChute, and of course when I started to get ire or attention on YouTube, that's when somebody managed to hack my YouTube account. Now it went dead and dormant for years, and for some reason YouTube said, "Hey, you want your account back? We unfroze your account." It's like, wow, that's nice, and it was empty. So, you can imagine, right? me studying again has taught me to start again. And despite still having a Rumble account, trying to grow that, and a growing account on BitChute. And yeah, so I don't know why YouTubers think they're my main audience. But yeah, so when I'm talking sometimes to my audience, it does confuse YouTubers because I do have other audiences, right? And they sometimes do ask questions, right? They say, and deservingly so, they deserve answers just as YouTubers deserve answers if you ever want to ask a question in the comments section. Yes, a lot of red pill, particularly in Europe, has come from the recognition that Western governments have surrendered to the East. This should not come as a shock for those who study, right, the red pill movement for a long time and realize, and you come across organizations like the OTO, Occidentalis Transalis Orient, basically East becoming West, right, and West becoming East, a transition, right, that the Occidental becomes Oriental, right, and the Oriental becomes Occidental, right. So the movement of whether or not it was intentional was to basically try to create a Romanesque empire, but an invisible one of political influence East and West through secret societies like the Freemasons and the Fabian Society and the Muslim Brotherhood and or other organizations having shared and common leadership, aka the Satanists and other anti-Christian movements. And increasingly, Red Pill has become a Christian movement, right? Particularly, I would say in the UK, but I would say broadly in the West. But Red Pill is no longer a Western movement. It is spreading, right? It's not just the recognition that London and parts of England were deliberately created to be less white by feminists, right? Feminists who increasingly became political and chasing the vote. And now what they're finding is they're not getting that vote. The Pakistani, right? You have an attempt to get the vote of the Pakistani community. And what are the Pakistani community? Well, they got for every white female they help get elected, they get 17 seats handed to them by Labour, right? Just to elect one desperate twat, right? So they don't care that they're selling you out because they don't care about the future, right? Only care is that they get to the finish line and just ahead of you and get to retire ahead of you and get to have more than you. And they don't care that you suffer, right? Because that's the point. They want you ground under their heel. And the more they mock you for alleged racism, right? You remember, Pakistan isn't diverse. It's all Pakistani. China's almost 99% Chinese, and so forth around the world, right? We're not representing the world, right? You don't represent the world. You don't have representation around the world. You don't have China saying, let's make 50% of China Chinese, British, or diversify, to reduce their own population to increase yours. No. Increasingly, right, you are, everybody equally poor, right? There's no equal wealth. There's only equal poverty. But the majority of feminism is not about rights. It's about privileges. It's about avoiding responsibility. It's about avoiding accountability for their actions, right? They don't want the consequences, the negative consequences of their actions, right? They want to control their sexuality. They want to control their body. This is the ultimate communist dream, right? To control everything. What's the environmental movement? Well, it's an offshoot of, right, of socialism created by Adolf Hitler. People don't know this, right? He started the Green Movement in Germany, right? He was an environmentalist. He was a vegan. He was an anti-smoking campaigner, right? He was pro-abortion, right? Babylon B did an excellent video on how progressives have more in common with Hitler than they do any other movement, including communism, by the way. But a lot of women don't want to be left over. They don't want to be left out. They don't want to be 50 and single, right? They wanted to, yes, feminism promised them a life. And they increasingly have not got it, right? The few who achieve power, right, are smug, right? They don't care about the organizations they became leaders in. They changed the organizations they fought to take, they went from representation, to running these organizations, to running them into the ground, whether they be the Anglican Church, any corporation with a female CEO, or a feminist CEO like Disney, right? Bob Iger was the sock puppet of Abigail Disney, and she ran the company to the ground. She openly made a video mocking everybody, claiming that Bob Iger's not going anywhere, that, he is a good feminist and does everything. Whenever I talk to Bob, which is every day, his great vision for Disney, right? She wanted to wipe out the Disney legacy because it wasn't inclusive, right? Feminism and the right. They start off young feminists, right, because they fell for the slogans. Then they became middle-aged spinsters because they didn't get married, didn't have kids. And then when they wanted to get married and have kids, they were old feminists, and so they started the whole cycle over again, right? Destroying society because they didn't get their happy ending, right? No matter how much they were warned, right? No, they couldn't be told. So, they've only themselves to blame, right? Right? So, increasingly, people have, checked out because, feminism
kids. The Royal Order of Sour Grapes for having a raisin for a brain.
Tis what it is. They have a raisin for a brain. No matter how much you warned them, right? How much you warned people about false leaders, right? The false idols of feminism, like Candace Owens, right? Laura Loomer. You go through the list. Almost every female influencer, right, who is either on the left or, claiming to be conservative, but conservatives don't spread lies. Conservatives are about, there's no real conservative because you got to remember, only 40% of conservatives vote for right-wing parties. That's why we're in the mess we're in, right? The majority of conservatives vote for the left to maintain liberal democracy. They have no interest in Christianity, right? To them, their religion is liberal democracy, right? Increasingly, secular holidays are worshipped, like St. Valentine's Day went from being a Catholic holiday about the death of a priest to a corporate holiday about the worship of money cherubs. Look it up, what a cherub is. You don't want to know, really. But I'm telling you, St. Valentine's Day is increasingly gay, increasingly corporate, and nothing but selling you chocolates, which has nothing to do with a Catholic priest standing up to a Roman Empire for the right for anyone, not just the rich, to get married. So you think the struggle of rights is anything new? No, 99% of people were oppressed then, and what about now? 99% of people are oppressed today. Who are the greatest oppressors? our fellow man who oppress us to sell us out to win. Actually, increasingly our fellow woman who sells us out to impress the 1%. Who do you think all these TikTokers are trying to impress? They're trying to advertise how psychotic they are, how manipulative they are, and of course increasingly showing their breasts to attract the 1%. Right? And of course if they're showing their breasts, they don't care if it's man or woman, they just care that they attract the attention of the rich and powerful. Because they know the rich and powerful have the only currency for the rich and powerful is either influence or sex. Right? There's no currency, right, that feminists particularly respond to more than gold. Right? There's no sex you could offer a feminist, right? Other than, because it's all temporary to them, right? Bad habit, I know. Asking you if I'm right. I should just should accept. If you think I am wrong, please, comment section. The first thing that comes to mind when you see feminists, any feminists, right? I personally see failure, right? They failed at life, right? They think that wealth is the goal and popularity is the goal. No, life is preparation, right? So for you, for many of you, yeah, you might feel right entitled to something beyond preparation. Hate to tell you this, right? But I'm going to help you anyway. I'm going to help mgtow men enjoy life because you are kings. You are the prize. This world is your oyster, right? And it belongs, right, to no one individual, but it belongs to men. It does not, right? You look at the natural order, right? We will win in the end. We will restore the natural order. Feminism will defeat itself, right? And we get to watch it as it kills itself. It's slowly strangling itself. We're watching the infighting. We don't have to do anything other than mock feminists, right? Do you think so? Right. So, I hope my mannerisms and figure of speeches are not too offensive, but in the end, I should not care what a handful of people say and do not like, because here, I'm just here to entertain and maybe inform you of something you may not know, or just remind you, because there is some sort of catharsis in reminding you that you are not alone, that you are part of a broader community, even if you merely like the memes. I didn't have many today, I know. But I can't keep coming up with new ones. There's only so much memory I have on my tiny little palm top. It's like, this computer's got the power of a palm top phone, right? It's not powerful, and it's definitely not a lot of memory. I could fit a few more in. I am looking for a few more. I haven't found them yet. So, a little bit of support, please, if you must. Okay. If you insist, I'll take some of your support from you at Ko-Fi, Patreon, over, Patreon, and, buy my books, buy my merch, I want to make a living, you want to make a living, we all got to make a living, whether you like it or not. The government is increasingly not our friend, and they are going down with the sinking ship, right? And they cannot stand it that we're standing on the shore watching it. They thought hitching their wagon to feminism was a good idea. Well, Lindsey Graham, bye, so long, sayonara. Increasingly all these turtles, Once they retire, they're finding they've got no friends, not even the family. They've got no comfort in life. They've got political achievements that they really got, right? Some little pat on the back from each other. And that ain't comforting any of them. They're pottering around without a clue what to do. And, of course, the cost of living and even the wealth they've accumulated, meaningless. And I got no sympathy. Have you? I didn't think so. So let me know in the comments below. What do you think, right? What do you see in some of these ridiculous people that I've shown you today? All right. What mockery do you have that hasn't been covered already? So see you in the next video, and bye for now.